In this video, we're going to talk about how you can use failure to elevate your game as an athlete. Hey there, I'm Eli Straw, mental performance coach and the founder of SuccessStarterThan.com. Now, no athlete wants to fail, and when you make mistakes in games or in practices, this can be incredibly frustrating. But if you begin to fear making mistakes and fear failing, that's where you find yourself performing timidly. And I was working with an athlete earlier this year who was talking about how when he performs, it feels like he's playing with his foot on the brake. The reason that he was playing with his foot on the brake was because he was afraid of making mistakes. And when you fear failure as an athlete, what happens is you're not focused on wanting to perform well, you're focused on not wanting to make a mistake. And while you might not make a mistake, you're also not going to be able to perform your best. You're not going to reach your full potential. So even if you don't make a mistake, you're probably still going to be leaving that game feeling frustrated that you know you left something in the tank. So one of the best ways that we can work on managing the fear of failure and making sure that fearing making mistakes doesn't really hold you back as an athlete is learning how to use failure to actually elevate and improve your game. One of the best ways I've found with working with other athletes in terms of helping them use failure to elevate their game is by applying a post-evaluation system. Because if you make a mistake during a game or you make a mistake during practice and you simply look at that mistake and you say, that was a mistake, that meant today was a bad game or today was a bad practice or I just didn't have it today. You're not really doing anything with that mistake. You are getting down on yourself, right? You're kind of getting frustrated, but what are you actually doing to take that mistake, learn something from it, and then apply it to your game moving forward? You're probably not doing too much. So if you really want to turn these mistakes and turn these failures into opportunities to elevate your game, then you have to give yourself the opportunity to actually learn something. And the way that you give yourself the opportunity to learn something from mistakes is by learning how to evaluate your mistakes instead of judging your mistakes. And what I mean by evaluating your mistakes instead of judging your mistakes is you look at the mistakes you made in terms of, all right, where can I improve? When you judge your mistakes, you look at those mistakes and you say, what did I do wrong today? What was a reason that I can say today was a bad game or today was a bad practice or why I just didn't have it today? Do you see the difference? One, you're evaluating, you're learning something. The other is you're judging. We want to evaluate. So what you can do after practices or games is you can start to really analyze your game and think about where can I improve, right? So you can look at a mistake and you can ask yourself, why did I make this mistake? What would I have done differently if I didn't want to make this mistake? What can I do during practices or training to start working on that skill to make sure I don't make the mistake again? And then in terms of going into another game, you have to ask yourself, what do I need to do going into the other game to learn from that mistake, to make sure I don't make that mistake again? So you see there's this way that you begin evaluating these mistakes and you begin pulling things from these mistakes that you can use to improve, you can use to learn and elevate your game. Now, one very important thing to remember is that you don't want to always be just looking at everything you did wrong and looking at your mistakes, which is why whenever I'm working with an athlete and we use this strategy, I always recommend that before they look at the things that they can improve from their day, I always recommend that they look at what they did well. Because even if you had a terrible game and you're just so frustrated with yourself, there's got to be something that you did well. And one of the ways that you can reduce fear of making mistakes and you can reduce this fear of failure is by increasing your confidence. And one of the best ways to increase your confidence is by giving yourself the opportunity to feel successful. We're not lying. We're not making things up. We're just choosing what we want to focus on. And so after a practice or after a game, you're going to choose to focus on the things you did well. Then what you can do is you can look at, all right, what were the mistakes that I made? Where can I improve? And then you start doing that evaluation system. If you are the parent of a young athlete, I encourage you to do this evaluation system with your young athletes. And the simplest way for you to do that is by just starting to ask them these questions after games. Instead of saying, what are the mistakes you made, you can start saying, why did you make that mistake? How could you learn from that mistake? What piece of information can you apply to your training? And by you starting to ask them these questions, they're going to start asking themselves these questions. Now, if you're an older athlete, what I encourage you to do is to use this evaluation system, but to write it out. The reason that it's important to write it out is because you want to have a record, right? You want to have a record of the mistakes you made this past week and how you're going to actually improve upon them. Because then what you can do is, let's say a month goes by, you can look back and you can say, all right, well, this was the mistake that I made a month ago. This is how I was supposed to be improving on it. Did I actually stay disciplined in improving on that mistake? Because if you make that similar mistake a month from now, that's okay, but you have to look back and see, did I really train the way I was going to train? Do I need to make some adjustments? And so having that evaluation system recorded and written down is going to be very helpful for you. So if you're an athlete wanting to learn how to turn failure into a learning experience and a way to actually improve your game, I encourage you to do that by putting an evaluation system into practice and learning how to evaluate your mistakes rather than judging your mistakes. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. I put out new videos each day on sports psychology and mental training. If you have any questions or topics that you would like me to cover, please leave them in the comments below. And if you're interested in learning more about one-on-one mental performance coaching, go ahead and click the link that I put in the description below. Thank you for watching, and I wish you the best of success in all that you do.